How to get into this book. Knock at the knocker on the door, pull the bell at the side. Then, if you are very quiet, you'll hear a teeny tiny voice say through the grating, "Take down the key." This you will find at the back. You cannot mistake it, for it has JJ in the wards. Put the key in the keyhole, which it fits exactly. Unlock the door and walk in. To my dear little May. Preface. Who says that English folk have no fairy tales of their own? The present volume contains only a selection out of some 140, of which I have found traces in this country. It is probable that many more exist. A quarter of the tales in this volume have been collected during the last 10 years or so, and some of them have not been hitherto published. Up to 1870, it was equally said of France and of Italy that they possessed no folk tales. Yet within 15 years from that date, over 1,000 tales had been collected in each country. I am hoping that the present volume may lead to equal activity in this country, and would earnestly beg any reader of this book who knows of similar tales to communicate them, written down as they are told, to me, care of Mr. Nutt. The only reason, I imagine, why such tales have not hitherto been brought to light is the lamentable gap between the governing and recording classes and the dumb working classes of this country, dumb to others but eloquent among themselves. It would be no unpatriotic task to help to bridge over this gulf by giving a common fund of nursery literature to all classes of the English people, and, in any case, it can do no harm to add to the innocent gaiety of the nation. A word or two as to our title seems necessary. We have called our stories fairy tales, though few of them speak of fairies. The same remark applies to the collection of the Brothers Grimm and to all the other European collections, which contain exactly the same classes of tales as ours. Yet our stories are what the little ones mean when they clamour for fairy tales, and this is the only name which they give to them. One cannot imagine a child saying, "Tell us a folk tale, nurse," or "Another nursery tale, please, grandma." As our book is intended for the little ones, we have indicated its contents by the name they use. The words fairy tales must accordingly be taken to include tales in which occurs something fairy, something extraordinary, fairies, giants, dwarfs, speaking animals. It must be taken also to cover tales in which what is extraordinary is the stupidity of some of the actors. Many of the tales in this volume, as in similar collections for other European countries, are what the folklorists call drolls. They serve to justify the title of Merry England, which used to be given to this country of ours, and indicate unsuspected capacity for fun and humour among the unlettered classes. The story of Tom Tit Tot, which opens our collection, is unequalled among all other folk tales I am acquainted with, for its combined sense of humour and dramatic power. The first adjective of our title also needs a similar extension of its meaning. I have acted on Molière's principle, and have taken what was good wherever I could find it. Thus, a couple of these stories have been found among descendants of English immigrants in America. A couple of others I tell as I heard them myself in my youth in Australia. One of the best was taken down from the mouth of an English gypsy. I have also included some stories that have only been found in Lowland Scotch. I have felt justified in doing this, as of the 21 folk tales contained in Chambers' Popular Rhymes of Scotland, no less than 16 are also to be found in an English form. With the folk tale, as with the ballad, Lowland Scotch may be regarded as simply a dialect of English, and it is a mere chance whether a tale is extant in one or other, or both. I have also rescued and retold a few fairy tales that only exist nowadays in the form of ballads. There are certain indications that the common form of the English fairy tale was the Conte Fable, a mixture of narrative and verse, of which the most illustrious example in literature is Aucassin and Nicolette. In one case I have endeavoured to retain this form, as the tale in which it occurs, Childe Roland, is mentioned by Shakespeare in King Lear, and is probably, as I have shown, the source of Milton's Comus. Late, as they have been collected, some dozen of the tales can be traced back to the 16th century, 2 of them being quoted by Shakespeare himself. In the majority of instances, I have had largely to rewrite these fairy tales, especially those in dialect, including the Lowland Scotch. Children, and sometimes those of larger growth, will not read dialect. I have also had to reduce the flatulent phraseology of the 18th century chapbooks, and to rewrite in simpler style the stories only extant in literary English. I have, however, left a few vulgarisms in the mouths of vulgar people. Children appreciate the dramatic propriety of this as much as their elders. Generally speaking, it has been my ambition to write as a good old nurse will speak when she tells fairy tales. I am doubtful as to my success in catching the colloquial romantic tone appropriate for such narratives, but the thing had to be done, or else my main object, to give a book of English fairy tales which English children will listen to, would have been unachieved. This book is meant to be read aloud, and not merely taken in by the eye. In a few instances I have introduced or changed an incident. I have never done so, however, without mentioning the fact in the notes. These have been relegated to the obscurity of small print and a back place, while the little ones have been, perhaps unnecessarily, warned off them. They indicate my sources and give a few references to parallels and variants which may be of interest to fellow students of folklore. It is perhaps not necessary to inform readers who are not fellow students that the study of folk tales has pretensions to be a science. It has its special terminology and its own methods of investigation by which it is hoped, one of these days, to gain fuller knowledge of the workings of the popular mind, as well as traces of archaic modes of thought and custom. I hope on some future occasion to treat the subject of the English folk tale on a larger scale and with all the necessary paraphernalia of prolegomena and excursus. I shall then, of course, reproduce my originals with literary accuracy, and have therefore felt the more at liberty on the present occasion to make the necessary deviations from this, in order to make the tales readable for children. Finally, I have to thank those by whose kindness in waiving their rights to some of these stories, I have been enabled to compile this book. My friends Mr. E. Clodd, Mr. F. Hines Groom, and Mr. Andrew Lang have thus yielded up to me some of the most attractive stories in the following pages. The councils of the English and of the American folklore societies, and Messrs. Longmans, have also been equally generous. Nor can I close these remarks without a word of thanks and praise to the artistic skill with which my friend, Mr. J. D. Batten, has made the romance and humour of these stories live again in the brilliant designs with which he has adorned these pages. It should be added that the dainty headpieces to Henny Penny and Mr. Fox are due to my old friend, Mr. Henry Ryland. Joseph Jacobs. End of the preface. Chapter 1. Tom Tit Tot. Once upon a time there was a woman, and she baked 5 pies. And when they came out of the oven, they were that overbaked the crusts were too hard to eat. So she says to her daughter, "Daughter," says she, "put you them there pies on the shelf, and leave 'em there a little, and they'll come again." She meant, you know, the crust would get soft. But the girl, she says to herself, "Well, if they'll come again, I'll eat 'em now." And she set to work and ate 'em all, first and last. Well, come supper time, the woman said, "Go you and get one of them there pies. I dare say they've come again now." The girl went and she looked, and there was nothing but the dishes. So back she came, and says she, "No, they ain't come again." "Not one of 'em," says the mother. "Not one of 'em," says she. "Well, come again or not come again," said the woman, "I'll have one for supper." "But you can't if they ain't come," said the girl. "But I can," says she. "Go you, and bring the best of 'em." "Best or worst," says the girl, "I've ate 'em all, and you can't have one till that's come again." Well, the woman she was done, and she took her spinning to the door to spin, and as she span, she sang, "My daughter ate five pies today. My daughter ate five pies today." The king was coming down the street, and he heard her sing, but what she sang he couldn't hear, so he stopped and said, "What was that you were singing, my good woman?" The woman was ashamed to let him hear what her daughter had been doing, so she sang instead of that, "My daughter has spun five skeins today. My daughter has spun five skeins today." "Stars o' mine," said the king, "I never heard tell of anyone that could do that." Then he said, "Look you here, I want a wife, and I'll marry your daughter. But look you here," says he, 11 months out of the year, she shall have all she likes to eat, and all the gowns she likes to get, and all the company she likes to keep. But the last month of the year she'll have to spin 5 skeins every day, and if she don't, I shall kill her." "All right," says the woman, for she thought what a grand marriage that was, and as for the 5 skeins, when the time came, there'd be plenty of ways of getting out of it, and likely as he'd have forgotten all about it. Well, so they were married, and for 11 months the girl had all she liked to eat, and all the gowns she liked to get, and all the company she liked to keep. But when the time was getting over, she began to think about the skeins, and to wonder if he had 'em in mind. But not one word did he say about 'em, and she thought he'd wholly forgotten 'em. However, the last day of the last month, he takes her to a room she'd never set eyes on before. There was nothing in it but a spinning wheel and a stool. And says he, "Now, my dear, here you'll be shut in tomorrow with some victuals and some flax, and if you haven't spun 5 skeins by the night, your head'll go off." And away he went about his business. Well, she was that frightened. She'd always been such a gatless girl that she didn't so much as know how to spin. And what was she to do tomorrow with no one to come nigh her to help her? She sat down on a stool in the kitchen, and lor, how she did cry. However, all of a sudden she heard a sort of a knocking low down on the door. She upped and oped it, and what should she see but a small little black thing with a long tail. That looked up at her right curious, and that said, "What are you crying for?" "What's that to you?" says she. "Never you mind," that said, "but tell me what you're crying for." "That won't do me no good if I do," says she. "You don't know that," that said, and twirled that's tail round. "Well," says she, "that won't do no harm if that don't do no good," and she upped and told about the pies and the skeins and everything. "This is what I'll do," says the little black thing. "I'll come to your window every morning, and take the flax, and bring it spun at night." "What's your pay?" says she. That looked out of the corner of that's eyes, and that said, "I'll give you 3 guesses every night to guess my name, and if you haven't guessed it before the month's up, you shall be mine." Well, she thought she'd be sure to guess that's name before the month was up. "All right," says she, "I agree." "All right," that says, and lor, how that twirled that's tail. Well, the next day, her husband took her into the room, and there was the flax and the day's food. "Now there's the flax," says he, "and if that ain't spun up this night, off goes your head." And then he went out and locked the door. He'd hardly gone when there was a knocking against the window. She upped and she oped it, and there, sure enough, was the little old thing sitting on the ledge. "Where's the flax?" says he. "Here it be," says she, and she gave it to him. Well, come the evening, a knocking came again to the window. She upped and she oped it, and there was the little old thing with 5 skeins of flax on his arm. "Here it be," says he, and he gave it to her. "Now what's my name?" says he. "What, is that Bill?" says she. "No, that ain't," says he, and he twirled his tail. "Is that Ned?" says she. "No, that ain't," says he, and he twirled his tail. "Well, is that Mark?" says she. "No, that ain't," says he, and he twirled his tail harder, and away he flew. Well, when her husband came in, there were the 5 skeins ready for him. "I see I shan't have to kill you tonight, my dear," says he. "You'll have your food and your flax in the morning," says he, and away he goes. Well, every day the flax and the food were brought, and every day that there little black impet used to come mornings and evenings. And all the day the girl sat trying to think of names to say to it when it came at night. But she never hit on the right one. And as it got towards the end of the month, the impet began to look so maliceful, and that twirled that's tail faster and faster each time she gave a guess. At last it came to the last day but one. The impet came at night, along with the 5 skeins, and that said, "What, ain't you got my name yet?" "Is that Nicodemus?" says she. "No, 'tain't," that says. "Is that Samuel?" says she. "No, 'tain't," that says. "Ah, well, is that Methusalem?" says she. "No, 'tain't that neither," that says. Then that looks at her with that's eyes like a coal of fire, and that says, "Woman, there's only tomorrow night, and then you'll be mine." And away it flew. Well, she felt that horrid. However, she heard the king coming along the passage. In he came, and when he sees the 5 skeins, he says he, "Well, my dear," says he, "I don't see but what you'll have your skeins ready tomorrow night as well, and as I reckon I shan't have to kill you, I'll have supper in here tonight." So they brought supper, and another stool for him, and down the 2 sat. Well, he hadn't eaten but a mouthful or so when he stops and begins to laugh. "What is it?" says she. "Why," says he, "I was out a-hunting today, and I got away to a place in the wood I'd never seen before, and there was an old chalk pit, and I heard a kind of a sort of a humming. So I got off my hobby, and I went right quiet to the pit, and I looked down. Well, what should there be but the funniest little black thing you ever set eyes on? And what was that doing but that had a little spinning wheel, and that was spinning wonderful fast, and twirling that's tail. And as that span that sang, 'Nimmy, nimmy not, my name's Tom Tit Tot.' Well, when the girl heard this, she felt as if she could have jumped out of her skin for joy, but she didn't say a word. Next day, that there little thing looked so maliceful when he came for the flax. And when night came, she heard that knocking against the window panes. She oped the window, and that come right in on the ledge. That was grinning from ear to ear, and ooh, that's tail was twirling round so fast. "What's my name?" that says, as that gave her the skeins. "Is that Solomon?" she says, pretending to be afeard. "No, 'tain't," that says, and that came further into the room. "Well, is that Zebedee?" says she again. "No, 'tain't," says the impet, and then that laughed and twirled that tail till you couldn't hardly see it. "Take time, woman," that says, "next guess, and you're mine." And that stretched out that's black hands at her. Well, she backed a step or 2, and she looked at it, and then she laughed out, and says she, pointing her finger at it, "Nimmy, nimmy not, your name's Tom Tit Tot." Well, when that heard her, that gave an awful shriek, and away that flew into the dark, and she never saw it any more. End chapter 1. Tom Tit Tot. Chapter 2. The Three Sillies. Once upon a time there was a farmer and his wife, who had one daughter, and she was courted by a gentleman. Every evening he used to come and see her, and stop to supper at the farmhouse, and the daughter used to be sent down into the cellar to draw the beer for supper. So one evening she had gone down to draw the beer, and she happened to look up at the ceiling while she was drawing, and she saw a mallet stuck in one of the beams. It must have been there a long, long time, but somehow or other she had never noticed it before, and she began a-thinking. And she thought it was very dangerous to have that mallet there, for she said to herself, "Suppose him and me was to be married, and we was to have a son, and he was to grow up to be a man, and come down into the cellar to draw the beer, like as I'm doing now, and the mallet was to fall on his head and kill him. What a dreadful thing it would be!" And she put down the candle and the jug, and sat herself down and began a-crying. Well, they began to wonder upstairs how it was that she was so long drawing the beer, and her mother went down to see after her, and she found her sitting on the settle crying, and the beer running over the floor. "Why, whatever is the matter?" said her mother. "Oh, mother," says she, "look at that horrid mallet. Suppose we was to be married, and was to have a son, and he was to grow up, and was to come down to the cellar to draw the beer, and the mallet was to fall on his head and kill him. What a dreadful thing it would be!" "Dear, dear, what a dreadful thing it would be!" said the mother, and she sat her down aside of the daughter, and started a-crying too. Then after a bit, the father began to wonder that they didn't come back, and he went down into the cellar to look after them himself. And there they two sat a-crying, and the beer running all over the floor. "Whatever is the matter?" says he. "Why," says the mother, "look at that horrid mallet. Just suppose if our daughter and her sweetheart was to be married, and was to have a son, and he was to grow up, and was to come down into the cellar to draw the beer, and the mallet was to fall on his head and kill him. What a dreadful thing it would be!" "Dear, dear, dear, so it would," said the father, and he sat himself down aside of the other two, and started a-crying. Now the gentleman got tired of stopping up in the kitchen by himself, and at last he went down into the cellar too, to see what they were after. And there they three sat a-crying side by side, and the beer running all over the floor. And he ran straight and turned the tap. Then he said, "Whatever are you three doing, sitting there crying, and letting the beer run all over the floor?" "Oh," says the father, "look at that horrid mallet. Suppose you and our daughter was to be married, and was to have a son, and he was to grow up, and was to come down into the cellar to draw the beer, and the mallet was to fall on his head and kill him." And then they all started a-crying worse than before. But the gentleman burst out a-laughing, and reached up and pulled out the mallet. And then he said, "I've travelled many miles, and I never met three such big sillies as you three before. And now I shall start out on my travels again, and when I can find three bigger sillies than you three, then I'll come back and marry your daughter." So he wished them good-bye, and started off on his travels, and left them all crying because the girl had lost her sweetheart. Well, he set out and he travelled a long way, and at last he came to a woman's cottage that had some grass growing on the roof. And the woman was trying to get her cow to go up a ladder to the grass, and the poor thing durst not go. So the gentleman asked the woman what she was doing. "Why, look ye," she said, "look at all that beautiful grass. I'm going to get the cow onto the roof to eat it. She'll be quite safe, for I shall tie a string round her neck, and pass it down the chimney, and tie it to my wrist as I go about the house, so she can't fall off without my knowing it." "Oh, you poor silly," said the gentleman. "You should cut the grass and throw it down to the cow." But the woman thought it was easier to get the cow up the ladder than to get the grass down. So she pushed her and coaxed her and got her up, and tied a string round her neck, and passed it down the chimney, and fastened it to her own wrist. And the gentleman went on his way. But he hadn't gone far when the cow tumbled off the roof, and hung by the string tied round her neck, and it strangled her. And the weight of the cow tied to her wrist pulled the woman up the chimney, and she stuck fast halfway, and was smothered in soot. Well, that was one big silly. And the gentleman went on, and he went to an inn to stop the night. And they were so full at the inn that they had to put him in a double-bedded room, and another traveller was to sleep in the other bed. The other man was a very pleasant fellow, and they got very friendly together. But in the morning, when they were both getting up, the gentleman was surprised to see the other hang his trousers on the knobs of the chest of drawers, and run across the room and try to jump into them. And he tried over and over again, and couldn't manage it. And the gentleman wondered whatever he was doing it for. At last he stopped and wiped his face with his handkerchief. "Oh dear," he says, "I do think trousers are the most awkwardest kind of clothes that ever were. I can't think who could have invented such things. It takes me the best part of an hour to get into mine every morning, and I get so hot. How do you manage yours?" So the gentleman burst out a-laughing, and showed him how to put them on. And he was very much obliged to him, and said he never should have thought of doing it that way. So that was another big silly. Then the gentleman went on his travels again, and he came to a village, and outside the village there was a pond, and round the pond was a crowd of people, and they had got rakes and brooms and pitchforks, reaching into the pond. And the gentleman asked what was the matter. "Why," they said, "matter enough. Moon's tumbled into the pond, and we can't rake her out anyhow." So the gentleman burst out a-laughing, and told them to look up into the sky, and that it was only the shadow in the water. But they wouldn't listen to him, and abused him shamefully, and he got away as quick as he could. So there was a whole lot of sillies, bigger than them 3 sillies at home. So the gentleman turned back home again, and married the farmer's daughter. And if they didn't live happy forever after, that's nothing to do with you or me. End of chapter 2. The 3 Sillies. Chapter 3. The Rose Tree. There was once upon a time a good man who had 2 children, a girl by a first wife, and a boy by the second. The girl was as white as milk, and her lips were like cherries. Her hair was like golden silk, and it hung to the ground. Her brother loved her dearly, but her wicked stepmother hated her. "Child," said the stepmother one day, "go to the grocer's shop and buy me a pound of candles." She gave her the money, and the little girl went, bought the candles, and started on her return. There was a stile to cross. She put down the candles whilst she got over the stile. Up came a dog and ran off with the candles. She went back to the grocer's, and she got a second bunch. She came to the stile, set down the candles, and proceeded to climb over. Up came the dog and ran off with the candles. She went again to the grocer's, and she got a third bunch, and just the same happened. Then she came to her stepmother crying, for she had spent all the money and had lost 3 bunches of candles. The stepmother was angry, but she pretended not to mind the loss. She said to the child, "Come, lay your head on my lap, that I may comb your hair." So the little one laid her head in the woman's lap, who proceeded to comb the yellow silken hair. And when she combed the hair, fell over her knees, and rolled right down to the ground. Then the stepmother hated her more for the beauty of her hair. So she said to her, "I cannot part your hair on my knee. Fetch a billet of wood." So she fetched it. Then said the stepmother, "I cannot part your hair with a comb. Fetch me an axe." So she fetched it. "Now," said the wicked woman, "lay your head down on the billet whilst I part your hair." Well, she laid down her little golden head without fear, and whist, down came the axe, and it was off. So the mother wiped the axe and laughed. Then she took the heart and liver of the little girl, and she stewed them, and brought them into the house for supper. The husband tasted them and shook his head. He said they tasted very strangely. She gave some to the little boy, but he would not eat. She tried to force him, but he refused, and ran out into the garden, and took up his little sister, and put her in a box, and buried the box under a rose tree. And every day he went to the tree and wept, till his tears ran down on the box. One day the rose tree flowered. It was spring, and there among the flowers was a white bird, and it sang and sang and sang like an angel out of heaven. Away it flew, and it went to a cobbler's shop, and perched itself on a tree hard by, and thus it sang: "My wicked mother slew me, my dear father ate me. My little brother whom I love sits below, and I sing above, stick, stock, stone dead." "Sing again that beautiful song," said the shoemaker, "if you will first give me those little red shoes you are making." The cobbler gave the shoes, and the bird sang the song, then flew to a tree in front of a watchmaker's, and sang: "My wicked mother slew me, my dear father ate me. My little brother whom I love sits below, and I sing above, stick, stock, stone dead." "Oh, the beautiful song! Sing it again, sweet bird," asked the watchmaker. "If you will give me first that gold watch and chain in your hand." The jeweller gave the watch and chain. The bird took it in one foot, the shoes in the other, and, after having repeated the song, flew away to where 3 millers were picking a millstone. The bird perched on a tree and sang: "My wicked mother slew me, my dear father ate me. My little brother whom I love sits below, and I sing above, stick." Then one of the men put down his tool and looked up from his work. "Stock." Then the second miller's man laid aside his tool and looked up. "Stone." Then the third miller's man laid down his tool and looked up. "Dead." Then all 3 cried out with one voice, "Oh, what a beautiful song! Sing it, sweet bird, again." "If you will put the millstone round my neck," said the bird. The men did what the bird wanted, and away to the tree it flew with the millstone round its neck, the red shoes in one foot, and the gold watch and chain in the other. It sang the song, and then flew home. It rattled the millstone against the eaves of the house, and the stepmother said, "It thunders." Then the little boy ran out to see the thunder, and down dropped the red shoes at his feet. It rattled the millstone against the eaves of the house once more, and the stepmother said again, "It thunders." Then the father ran out, and down fell the chain about his neck. In ran father and son, laughing and saying, "See what fine things the thunder has brought us." Then the bird rattled the millstone against the eaves of the house a 3rd time, and the stepmother said, "It thunders again. Perhaps the thunder has brought something for me." And she ran out, but the moment she stepped outside the door, down fell the millstone on her head, and so she died. End of Chapter 3, The Rose Tree. Chapter 4, The Old Woman and Her Pig. An old woman was sweeping her house, and she found a little crooked sixpence. "What," said she, "shall I do with this little sixpence? I will go to market and buy a little pig." As she was coming home, she came to a stile, but the piggy wouldn't go over the stile. She went a little further, and she met a dog. So she said to the dog, "Dog, bite pig. Piggy won't go over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the dog wouldn't. She went a little further, and she met a stick. So she said, "Stick, stick, beat dog. Dog won't bite pig. Piggy won't get over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the stick wouldn't. She went a little further, and she met a fire. So she said, "Fire, fire, burn stick. Stick won't beat dog. Dog won't bite pig. Piggy won't get over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the fire wouldn't. She went a little further, and she met some water. So she said, "Water, water, quench fire. Fire won't burn stick. Stick won't beat dog. Dog won't bite pig. Piggy won't get over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the water wouldn't. She went a little further, and she met an ox. So she said, "Ox, ox, drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn stick. Stick won't beat dog. Dog won't bite pig. Piggy won't get over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the ox wouldn't. She went a little further, and she met a butcher. So she said, "Butcher, butcher, kill ox. Ox won't drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn stick. Stick won't beat dog. Dog won't bite pig. Piggy won't get over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the butcher wouldn't. She went a little further, and she met a rope. So she said, "Rope, rope, hang butcher. Butcher won't kill ox. Ox won't drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn stick. Stick won't beat dog. Dog won't bite pig. Piggy won't get over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the rope wouldn't. She went a little further, and she met a rat. So she said, "Rat, rat, gnaw rope. Rope won't hang butcher. Butcher won't kill ox. Ox won't drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn stick. Stick won't beat dog. Dog won't bite pig. Piggy won't get over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the rat wouldn't. She went a little further, and she met a cat. So she said, "Cat, cat, kill rat. Rat won't gnaw rope. Rope won't hang butcher. Butcher won't kill ox. Ox won't drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn stick. Stick won't beat dog. Dog won't bite pig. Piggy won't get over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the cat said to her, "If you will go to yonder cow and fetch me a saucer of milk, I will kill the rat." So away went the old woman to the cow. But the cow said to her, "If you will go to yonder haystack and fetch me a handful of hay, I'll give you the milk." So away went the old woman to the haystack, and she brought the hay to the cow. As soon as the cow had eaten the hay, she gave the old woman the milk, and away she went with it in a saucer to the cat. As soon as the cat had lapped up the milk, the cat began to kill the rat. The rat began to gnaw the rope. The rope began to hang the butcher. The butcher began to kill the ox. The ox began to drink the water. The water began to quench the fire. The fire began to burn the stick. The stick began to beat the dog. The dog began to bite the pig. The little pig in a fright jumped over the stile, and so the old woman got home that night. End of Chapter 4. The Old Woman and Her Pig. Chapter 5. How Jack Went to Seek His Fortune. Once on a time there was a boy named Jack, and one morning he started to go and seek his fortune. He hadn't gone very far before he met a cat. "Where are you going, Jack?" said the cat. "I am going to seek my fortune." "May I go with you?" "Yes," said Jack. "The more the merrier." So on they went, jiggelty-jolt, jiggelty-jolt. They went a little further and they met a dog. "Where are you going, Jack?" said the dog. "I am going to seek my fortune." "May I go with you?" "Yes," said Jack, "the more the merrier." So on they went, jiggelty-jolt, jiggelty-jolt. They went a little further and they met a goat. "Where are you going, Jack?" said the goat. "I am going to seek my fortune." "May I go with you?" "Yes," said Jack, "the more the merrier." So on they went, jiggelty-jolt, jiggelty-jolt. They went a little further and they met a bull. "Where are you going, Jack?" said the bull. "I am going to seek my fortune." "May I go with you?" "Yes," said Jack, "the more the merrier." So on they went, jiggelty-jolt, jiggelty-jolt. They went a little further and they met a rooster. "Where are you going, Jack?" said the rooster. "I am going to seek my fortune." "May I go with you?" "Yes," said Jack, "the more the merrier." So on they went, jiggelty-jolt, jiggelty-jolt. Well, they went on till it was about dark, and they began to think of some place where they could spend the night. About this time they came in sight of a house, and Jack told them to keep still while he went up and looked in through the window. And there were some robbers counting over the money. Then Jack went back and told them to wait till he gave the word, and then to make all the noise they could. So when they were all ready, Jack gave the word, and the cat mewed, and the dog barked, and the goat bleated, and the bull bellowed, and the rooster crowed, and all together they made such a dreadful noise that it frightened the robbers all away. And then they went in and took possession of the house. Jack was afraid the robbers would come back in the night, and so when it came time to go to bed, he put the cat in the rocking chair, and he put the dog under the table, and he put the goat upstairs, and he put the bull down cellar, and the rooster flew up onto the roof, and Jack went to bed. By and by the robbers saw it was all dark, and they sent one man back to the house to look after their money. Before long he came back in a great fright, and told them his story. "I went back to the house," said he, "and went in and tried to sit down in the rocking chair, and there was an old woman knitting, and she stuck her knitting needles into me." That was the cat, you know. "I went to the table to look after the money, and there was a shoemaker under the table, and he stuck his awl into me." That was the dog, you know. "I started to go upstairs, and there was a man up there threshing, and he knocked me down with his flail." That was the goat, you know. "I started to go down cellar, and there was a man down there chopping wood, and he knocked me up with his axe." That was the bull, you know. "But I shouldn't have minded all that if it hadn't been for that little fellow on top of the house who kept a-hollering, 'Chuck him up to me! Chuck him up to me!'" Of course, that was the cock-a-doodle-doo. End of chapter 5. How Jack Went to Seek His Fortune. Chapter 6. Mr. Vinegar. Mr. and Mrs. Vinegar lived in a vinegar bottle. Now one day, when Mr. Vinegar was from home, Mrs. Vinegar, who was a very good housewife, was busily sweeping her house, when an unlucky thump of the broom brought the whole house clitter-clatter, clitter-clatter, about her ears. In an agony of grief, she rushed forth to meet her husband. On seeing him, she exclaimed, "Oh, Mr. Vinegar, Mr. Vinegar, we are ruined. I have knocked the house down, and it is all to pieces." Mr. Vinegar then said, "My dear, let us see what can be done. Here is the door. I will take it on my back, and we will go forth to seek our fortune." They walked all that day, and at nightfall entered a thick forest. They were both very, very tired, and Mr. Vinegar said, "My love, I will climb up into a tree, drag up the door, and you shall follow." He accordingly did so, and they both stretched their weary limbs on the door and fell fast asleep. In the middle of the night, Mr. Vinegar was disturbed by the sound of voices underneath, and to his horror and dismay, found that it was a band of thieves met to divide their booty. "Here, Jack," said one, "here's £5 for you. Here, Bill, here's £10 for you. Here, Bob, here's £3 for you." Mr. Vinegar could listen no longer. His terror was so great that he trembled and shook down the door on their heads. Away scampered the thieves, but Mr. Vinegar dared not quit his retreat till broad daylight. He then scrambled out of the tree and went to lift up the door. What did he see but a number of golden guineas? "Come down, Mrs. Vinegar," he cried. "Come down, I say. Our fortune's made! Our fortune's made! Come down, I say!" Mrs. Vinegar got down as fast as she could, and when she saw the money, she jumped for joy. "Now, my dear," said she, "I'll tell you what you shall do. There is a fair at the neighbouring town. You shall take these 40 guineas and buy a cow. I can make butter and cheese, which you shall sell at market, and we shall then be able to live very comfortably." Mr. Vinegar joyfully agrees, takes the money, and off he goes to the fair. When he arrived, he walked up and down, and at length saw a beautiful red cow. It was an excellent milker, and perfect in every way. "Oh," thought Mr. Vinegar, "if I had but that cow, I should be the happiest man alive." So he offers the 40 guineas for the cow, and the owner said that, as he was a friend, he'd oblige him. So the bargain was made, and he got the cow, and he drove it backwards and forwards to show it. By and by he saw a man playing the bagpipes. Tweedledum, tweedledee. The children followed him about, and he appeared to be pocketing money on all sides. "Well," thought Mr. Vinegar, "if I had but that beautiful instrument, I should be the happiest man alive. My fortune would be made." So he went up to the man. "Friend," says he, "what a beautiful instrument that is, and what a deal of money you must make." "Why, yes," said the man, "I make a great deal of money, to be sure, and it is a wonderful instrument." "Oh," cried Mr. Vinegar, "how I should like to possess it." "Well," said the man, "as you are a friend, I don't much mind parting with it. You shall have it for that red cow." "Done," said the delighted Mr. Vinegar. So the beautiful red cow was given for the bagpipes. He walked up and down with his purchase, but it was in vain he tried to play a tune, and instead of pocketing pence, the boys followed him hooting, laughing, and pelting. Poor Mr. Vinegar! His fingers grew very cold, and just as he was leaving the town, he met a man with a fine thick pair of gloves. "Oh, my fingers are so very cold," said Mr. Vinegar to himself. "Now if I had but those beautiful gloves, I should be the happiest man alive." He went up to the man and said to him, "Friend, you seem to have a capital pair of gloves there." "Yes, truly," cried the man, "and my hands are as warm as possible this cold November day." "Well," said Mr. Vinegar, "I should like to have them." "What will you give?" said the man. "As you are a friend, I don't much mind letting you have them for those bagpipes." Done! cried Mr. Vinegar. He put on the gloves and felt perfectly happy as he trudged homewards. At last he grew very tired, when he saw a man coming towards him with a good stout stick in his hand. "Oh," said Mr. Vinegar, "that I had but that stick! I should then be the happiest man alive." He said to the man, "Friend, what a rare good stick you have got." "Yes," said the man, "I have used it for many a long mile, and a good friend it has been. But if you have a fancy for it, as you are a friend, I don't mind giving it to you for that pair of gloves." Mr. Vinegar's hands were so warm, and his legs so tired, that he gladly made the exchange. As he drew near to the wood where he had left his wife, he heard a parrot on a tree calling out his name. "Mr. Vinegar, you foolish man, you blockhead, you simpleton, you went to the fair and laid out all your money in buying a cow. Not content with that, you changed it for bagpipes on which you could not play, and which were not worth 1/10 of the money. You fool, you had no sooner got the bagpipes than you changed them for the gloves, which were not worth 1/4 of the money. And when you had got the gloves, you changed them for a poor miserable stick. And now for your 40 guineas, cow, bagpipes, and gloves, you have nothing to show but that poor miserable stick, which you might have cut in any hedge." On this the bird laughed and laughed, and Mr. Vinegar, falling into a violent rage, threw the stick at its head. The stick lodged in the tree, and he returned to his wife without money, cow, bagpipes, gloves, or stick, and she instantly gave him such a sound cudgelling that she almost broke every bone in his skin. End of chapter 6. Mr. Vinegar. Chapter 7. Nix Nought Nothing. There once lived a king and a queen, as many a one has been. They were long married and had no children. But at last a baby boy came to the queen, when the king was away in the far countries. The queen would not christen the boy till the king came back, and she said, "We will just call him Nix Nought Nothing until his father comes home." But it was long before he came home, and the boy had grown a nice little laddie. At length the king was on his way back, but he had a big river to cross, and there was a whirlpool, but he could not get over the water. But a giant came up to him and said, "I'll carry you over." But the king said, "What's your pay?" "Oh, give me Nix Nought Nothing, and I will carry you over the water on my back." The king had never heard that his son was called Nix Nought Nothing, and so he said, "Oh, I'll give you that and my thanks into the bargain." When the king got home again, he was very happy to see his wife again, and his young son. She told him that she had not given the child any name, but just Nix Nought Nothing, until he should come home again himself. The poor king was in a terrible case. He said, "What have I done? I promised to give the giant who carried me over the river on his back Nix Nought Nothing." The king and the queen were sad and sorry, but they said, "When the giant comes, we will give him the henwife's boy. He will never know the difference." The next day the giant came to claim the king's promise, and he sent for the henwife's boy, and the giant went away with the boy on his back. He travelled till he came to a big stone, and there he sat down to rest. He said, "Hidge Hodge on my back, what time of day is that?" The poor little boy said, "It is the time that my mother, the henwife, takes up the eggs for the queen's breakfast." The giant was very angry, and dashed the boy's head on the stone, and killed him. So he went back in a tower of temper, and this time they gave him the gardener's boy. He went off with him on his back, till they got to the stone again when the giant sat down to rest. And he said, "Hidge Hodge on my back, what time of day do you make that?" The gardener's boy said, "Sure, it's the time that my mother takes up the vegetables for the queen's dinner." Then the giant was right wild and dashed his brains out on the stone. Then the giant went back to the king's house in a terrible temper and said he would destroy them all if they did not give him Nix Nought Nothing this time. They had to do it, and when he came to the big stone, the giant said, "What time of day is that?" Nix Nought Nothing said, "It is the time that my father the king will be sitting down to supper." The giant said, "I've got the right one now," and took Nix Nought Nothing to his own house and brought him up till he was a man. The giant had a bonny daughter, and she and the lad grew very fond of each other. The giant said one day to Nix Nought Nothing, "I've work for you tomorrow. There is a stable 7 miles long and 7 miles broad, and it has not been cleaned for 7 years, and you must clean it tomorrow, or I will have you for my supper." The giant's daughter went out next morning with the lad's breakfast, and found him in a terrible state, for always, as he cleaned out a bit, it just fell in again. The giant's daughter said she would help him, and she cried all the beasts in the field and all the fowls of the air, and in a minute they all came and carried away everything that was in the stable and made it all clean before the giant came home. He said, "Shame on the wit that helped you, but I have a worse job for you tomorrow." Then he said to Nix Nought Nothing, "There's a lake 7 miles long and 7 miles deep and 7 miles broad, and you must drain it tomorrow by nightfall, or else I'll have you for my supper." Nix Nought Nothing began early next morning and tried to lave the water with his pail, but the lake was never getting any less, and he didn't know what to do. But the giant's daughter called on all the fish in the sea to come and drink the water, and very soon they drank it dry. When the giant saw the work done, he was in a rage and said, "I've a worse job for you tomorrow. There is a tree 7 miles high and no branch on it, till you get to the top, and there is a nest with 7 eggs in it, and you must bring down all the eggs without breaking one, or else I'll have you for my supper." At first the giant's daughter did not know how to help Nix Nought Nothing. She cut off first her fingers and then her toes, and made steps of them, and he clomb the tree and got all the eggs safe till he came just to the bottom, and then one was broken. So they determined to run away together, and after the giant's daughter had tidied up her hair a bit and got her magic flask, they set out together as fast as they could run. And they hadn't got but 3 fields away when they looked back and saw the giant walking along at top speed after them. "Quick, quick!" called out the giant's daughter. "Take my comb from my hair and throw it down." Nix Nought Nothing took her comb from her hair and threw it down, and out of every one of its prongs there sprung up a fine thick briar in the way of the giant. You may be sure it took him a long time to work his way through the briar bush, and by the time he was well through, Nix Nought Nothing and his sweetheart had run on a tidy step away from him. But he soon came along after them, and was just like to catch him up when the giant's daughter called out to Nix Nought Nothing, "Take my hair dagger and throw it down, quick, quick!" So Nix Nought Nothing threw down the hair dagger, and out of it grew as quick as lightning a thick hedge of sharp razors placed criss-cross. The giant had to tread very cautiously to get through all this, and meanwhile the young lovers ran on and on and on, till they were nearly out of sight. But at last the giant was through, and it wasn't long before he was like to catch them up. But just as he was stretching out his hand to catch Nix Nought Nothing, his daughter took out her magic flask and dashed it on the ground. And as it broke, out of it welled a big, big wave that grew and that grew, till it reached the giant's waist, and then his neck. And when it got to his head, he was drowned dead, and dead, and dead indeed. So he goes out of the story. But Nix Nought Nothing fled on till where do you think they came to? Why, to near the castle of Nix Nought Nothing's father and mother. But the giant's daughter was so weary that she couldn't move a step further. So Nix Nought Nothing told her to wait there while he went and found out a lodging for the night. And he went on towards the lights of the castle, and on the way he came to the cottage of the henwife, whose boy had had his brains dashed out by the giant. Now she knew Nix Nought Nothing in a moment, and hated him because he was the cause of her son's death. So when he asked his way to the castle, she put a spell upon him. And when he got to the castle, no sooner was he let in than he fell down dead asleep upon a bench in the hall. The king and queen tried all they could do to wake him up, but all in vain. So the king promised that if any lady could wake him up, she should marry him. Meanwhile, the giant's daughter was waiting and waiting for him to come back, and she went up into a tree to watch for him. The gardener's daughter, going to draw water in the well, saw the shadow of the lady in the water, and thought it was herself, and said, "If I'm so bonny, if I'm so brave, why do you send me to draw water?" So she threw down her pail, and went to see if she could wed the sleeping stranger. And she went to the henwife, who taught her an unspelling catch, which would keep Nix Nought Nothing awake as long as the gardener's daughter liked. So she went up to the castle and sang her catch, and Nix Nought Nothing was wakened for a bit, and they promised to wed him to the gardener's daughter. Meanwhile, the gardener went down to draw water from the well, and saw the shadow of the lady in the water. So he looks up and finds her, and he brought the lady from the tree, and led her into his house. And he told her that a stranger was to marry his daughter, and took her up to the castle, and showed her the man. And it was Nix Nought Nothing asleep in a chair. And she saw him, and cried to him, "Waken, waken, and speak to me." But he would not waken. And soon she cried, "I cleaned the stable, I laved the lake, and I clomb the tree, and all for the love of thee, and thou wilt not waken and speak to me." The king and the queen heard this, and came to the bonny young lady, and she said, "I cannot get Nix Nought Nothing to speak to me for all that I can do." Then were they greatly astonished when she spoke of Nix Nought Nothing, and asked where he was, and she said, "He that sits there in the chair." Then they ran to him and kissed him, and called him their own dear son. So they called for the gardener's daughter, and made her sing her charm, and he wakened, and told them all that the giant's daughter had done for him, and of all her kindness. Then they took her in their arms and kissed her, and said she should now be their daughter, for their son should marry her. But they sent for the henwife, and put her to death. And they lived happy all their days. End of chapter 7. Nix Nought Nothing. Chapter 8. Jack Hannaford. There was an old soldier who had been long in the wars, so long that he was quite out at elbows, and he did not know where to go to find a living. So he walked up moors, down glens, till at last he came to a farm, from which the good man had gone away to market. The wife of the farmer was a very foolish woman, who had been a widow when he married her. The farmer was foolish enough too, and it is hard to say which of the two was the more foolish. When you've heard my tale, you may decide. Now before the farmer goes to market, says he to his wife, "Here is 10 pounds all in gold. Take care of it till I come home." If the man had not been a fool, he would never have given the money to his wife to keep. Well, off he went in his cart to market, and the wife said to herself, "I will keep the 10 pounds quite safe from thieves." So she tied it up in a rag, and she put the rag up the parlour chimney. "There," said she, "no thieves will ever find it now, that is quite sure." Jack Hannaford, the old soldier, came and rapped at the door. "Who is there?" asked the wife. "Jack Hannaford." "Where do you come from?" "Paradise." Lord a mercy, and maybe you've seen my old man there," alluding to her former husband. "Yes, I have." "And how was he a-doing?" asked the goody. "But middling. He cobbles old shoes, and he has nothing but cabbage for victuals." "Deary me!" exclaimed the woman. "Didn't he send a message to me?" "Yes, he did," replied Jack Hannaford. "He said that he was out of leather, and his pockets were empty, so you were to send him a few shillings to buy a fresh stock of leather." "He shall have them, bless his poor soul!" And away went the wife to the parlour chimney, and she pulled the rag with the 10 pounds in it from the chimney, and she gave the whole sum to the soldier, telling him that her old man was to use as much as he wanted, and to send back the rest. It was not long that Jack waited after receiving the money. He went off as fast as he could. Presently the farmer came home and asked his wife for his money. The wife told him that she had sent it by a soldier to her former husband in paradise, to buy him leather for cobbling the shoes of the saints and angels of heaven. The farmer was very angry, and he saw that he had never met with such a fool as his wife. But the wife said that her husband was a greater fool for letting her have the money. There was no time to waste words, so the farmer mounted his horse and rode off after Jack Hannaford. The old soldier heard the horse's hoofs clattering on the road behind him, so he knew it must be the farmer pursuing him. He lay down on the ground, and shading his eyes with one hand, looked up into the sky, and pointed heavenwards with the other hand. "What are you about there?" asked the farmer, pulling up. "Lord save you!" exclaimed Jack. "I've seen a rare sight." "What was that?" "A man going straight up into the sky as if he were walking on a road." "Can you see him still?" "Yes, I can." "Where?" "Get off your horse and lie down." "If you will hold the horse." Jack did so readily. "I cannot see him," said the farmer. "Shade your eyes with your hand, and you'll soon see a man flying away from you." Sure enough, he did so, for Jack leapt on the horse and rode away with it. The farmer walked home without his horse. "You are a bigger fool than I am," said the wife, "for I did only one foolish thing, and you have done two." End of Chapter 8. Jack Hannaford. Chapter 9. Binnorie. Once upon a time, there were 2 kings' daughters lived in a bower near the bonny mill dams of Binnorie. And Sir William came wooing the eldest, and won her love, and plighted troth with glove and with ring. But after a time he looked upon the youngest, with her cherry cheeks and golden hair, and his love grew towards her, till he cared no longer for the eldest one. So she hated her sister for taking away Sir William's love, and day by day her hate grew upon her, and she plotted and she planned how to get rid of her. So one fine morning, fair and clear, she said to her sister, "Let us go and see our father's boats come in at the bonny mill-stream of Binnorie." So they went there hand in hand, and when they got to the river's bank, the youngest got upon a stone to watch for the coming of the boats, and her sister, coming behind her, caught her round the waist and dashed her into the rushing mill-stream of Binnorie. "Oh, sister, sister, reach me your hand," she cried, as she floated away, "and you shall have half of all I've got or shall get." "No, sister, I'll reach you no hand of mine, for I am the heir to all your land. Shame on me if I touch the hand that has come twixt me and my own heart's love." Oh, sister, then reach me your glove," she cried, as she floated further away, "and you shall have your William again." "Sink on," cried the cruel princess. "No hand or glove of mine you'll touch. Sir William will be all mine when you are sunk beneath the bonny mill-stream of Binnorie." And she turned and went home to the king's castle. And the princess floated down the mill-stream, sometimes swimming and sometimes sinking, till she came near the mill. Now the miller's daughter was cooking that day, and needed water for her cooking. And as she went to draw it from the stream, she saw something floating towards the mill dam, and she cried out, "Father, father, draw your dam, there's something white, a merry maid or a milk-white swan, coming down the stream." So the miller hastened to the dam, and stopped the heavy, cruel mill wheels. And then they took out the princess, and laid her on the bank. Fair and beautiful she looked as she lay there. In her golden hair were pearls and precious stones. You could not see her waist for her golden girdle, and the golden fringe of her white dress came down over her lily feet. But she was drowned, drowned. As she lay there in her beauty, a famous harper passed by the mill dam of Binnorie, and saw her sweet, pale face. And though he travelled on far way, he never forgot that face. And after many days he came back to the bonny mill stream of Binnorie. But then all he could find of her, where they had put her to rest, were her bones and her golden hair. So he made a harp out of her breastbone and her hair, and travelled on up the hill from the mill dam of Binnorie, till he came to the castle of the king her father. That night they were all gathered in the castle hall to hear the great harper, king and queen, their daughter and son, Sir William, and all their court. And first the harper sang to his old harp, making them joy, and be glad or sorrow and weep, just as he liked. And while he sang, he put the harp he had made that day on a stone in the hall. And presently it began to sing by itself, low and clear, and the harper stopped, and all were hushed. And this was what the harp sung. O yonder sits my father, the king, Binnorie, O Binnorie, and yonder sits my mother, the queen, by the bonny mill dams of Binnorie. And yonder stands my brother Hugh, Binnorie, O Binnorie, and by him my William, false and true, by the bonny mill dams of Binnorie. Then they all wondered, and the harper told them how he had seen the princess lying drowned on the bank near the bonny mill dams of Binnorie, and how he had afterwards made this harp out of her hair and breastbone. Just then the harp began singing again, and this was what it sang, out loud and clear. And there sits my sister who drowned me, by the bonny mill dams of Binnorie. And then the harp snapped and broke, and never sang more. End of Chapter 9, Binnorie. Chapter 10, Mouse and Mouser. The mouse went to visit the cat, and found her sitting behind the hall door spinning. Mouse. What are you doing, my lady, my lady? What are you doing, my lady? Cat, sharply. I'm spinning old breeches, good body, good body. I'm spinning old breeches, good body. Mouse. Long may you wear them, my lady, my lady. Long may you wear them, my lady. Cat, gruffly. I'll wear 'em and tear 'em, good body, good body. I'll wear 'em and tear 'em, good body. Mouse. I was sweeping my room, my lady, my lady. I was sweeping my room, my lady. Cat. The cleaner you'd be, good body, good body. The cleaner you'd be, good body. Mouse. I found a silver sixpence, my lady, my lady. I found a silver sixpence, my lady. Cat. The richer you were, good body, good body. The richer you were, good body. Mouse. I went to the market, my lady, my lady. I went to the market, my lady. Cat. The further you went, good body, good body. The further you went, good body. Mouse. I bought me a pudding, my lady, my lady. I bought me a pudding, my lady. Cat, snarling. The more meat you had, good body, good body. the more meat you had, good body. Mouse. I put it in the window to cool, my lady. I put it in the window to cool. Cat sharply. The faster you'd eat it, good body, good body. The faster you'd eat it, good body. Mouse timidly. The cat came and ate it, my lady, my lady. The cat came and ate it, my lady. Cat pouncingly. And I'll eat you, good body, and I'll eat you, good body. Springs upon the mouse and kills it. End of chapter 10. Mouse and Mouser. Chapter 11. Cap o' Rushes. Well, there was once a very rich gentleman, and he'd 3 daughters, and he thought he'd see how fond they were of him. So he says to the first, How much do you love me, my dear? Why, says she, as I love my life. That's good, says he. So he says to the second, How much do you love me, my dear? Why, says she, better nor all the world. That's good, says he. So he says to the third, How much do you love me, my dear? Why, I love you as fresh meat loves salt, says she. Well, he was that angry. You don't love me at all, says he, and in my house you stay no more. So he drove her out there and then, and shut the door in her face. Well, she went away on and on, till she came to a fen, and there she gathered a lot of rushes, and made them into a sort of a cloak with a hood, to cover her from head to foot, and to hide her fine clothes. And then she went on, till she came to a great house. Do you want a maid? Says she. No, we don't, said they. I haven't nowhere to go, says she, and I ask no wages, and do any sort of work, says she. Well, says they, if you like to wash the pots and scrape the saucepans, you may stay, said they. So she stayed there and washed the pots and scraped the saucepans and did all the dirty work. And because she gave no name, they called her Cap o' Rushes. Well, one day there was to be a great dance a little way off, and the servants were allowed to go and look on at the grand people. Cap o' Rushes said she was too tired to go, so she stayed at home. But when they were gone, she offed with her cap o' rushes and cleaned herself and went to the dance, and no one there was so finely dressed as her. Well, who should be there but her master's son, and what should he do but fall in love with her the minute he set eyes on her? He wouldn't dance with anyone else. But before the dance was done, Cap o' Rushes slipped off, and away she went home. And when the other maids came back, she was pretending to be asleep with her cap o' rushes on. Well, next morning they said to her, You did miss a sight, Cap o' Rushes. What was that? Says she. Why, the beautifulest lady you ever see, dressed right gay and ga. The young master, he never took his eyes off her. Well, I should have liked to have seen her, says Cap o' Rushes. Well, there's to be another dance this evening, and perhaps she'll be there. But come the evening, Cap o' Rushes said she was too tired to go with them. Howsoever, when they were gone, she offed with her cap o' rushes and cleaned herself, and away she went to the dance. The master's son had been reckoning on seeing her, and he danced with no one else, and never took his eyes off her. But before the dance was over, she slipped off, and home she went. And when the maids came back, she pretended to be asleep with her cap o' rushes on. Next day they said to her again, Well, Cap o' Rushes, you should have been there to seen the lady. There she was again, gay and ga, and the young master, he never took his eyes off her. Well there, says she, I should have liked to have seen her. Well, says they, there's a dance again this evening, and you must go with us, for she's sure to be there. Well, come this evening, Cap o' Rushes said she was too tired to go, and do what they would, she stayed at home. But when they were gone, she offed with her cap o' rushes and cleaned herself, and away she went to the dance. The master's son was really glad when he saw her. He danced with none but her, and never took his eyes off her. When she wouldn't tell him her name, nor where she came from, he gave her a ring, and told her if he didn't see her again, he should die. Well, before the dance was over, off she slipped, and home she went, and when the maids came home she was pretending to sleep with her cap o' rushes on. Well, next day they says to her, "There, Cap o' Rushes, you didn't come last night, and now you won't see the lady, for there's no more dances." "Well, I should have really liked to have seen her," says she. The master's son, he tried every way to find out where the lady was gone. But go where he might, and ask whom he might, he never heard anything about her, and he got worse and worse for the love of her, till he had to keep his bed. "Make some gruel for the young master," they said to the cook. "He's dying for the love of the lady." The cook, she set about making it when Cap o' Rushes came in. "What are you a-doing of?" says she. "I'm going to make some gruel for the young master," says the cook, "for he's dying for love of the lady." "Let me make it," says Cap o' Rushes. Well, the cook wouldn't at first, but at last she said yes, and Cap o' Rushes made the gruel. And when she had made it, she slipped the ring into it on the sly, before the cook took it upstairs. The young man, he drank it, and then he saw the ring at the bottom. "Send for the cook," says he. So up she comes. "Who made this gruel here?" says he. "I did," says the cook, for she was frightened. And he looked at her. "No, you didn't," says he. "Say who did it, and you shan't be harmed." "Well then, 'twas Cap o' Rushes," says she. "Send Cap o' Rushes here," says he. So Cap o' Rushes came. "Did you make my gruel?" says he. "Yes, I did," says she. "Where did you get this ring?" says he. "From him that gave it me," says she. "Who are you then?" says the young man. "I'll show you," says she, and she offed with her Cap o' Rushes, and there she was in her beautiful clothes. Well, the master's son, he got well very soon, and they were to be married in a little time. It was to be a very grand wedding, and everyone was asked far and near. And Cap o' Rushes' father was asked, but she never told anybody who she was. But before the wedding she went to the cook and says she, "I want you to dress every dish without a mite of salt." "That'll be rare nasty," says the cook. "That doesn't signify," says she. "Very well," says the cook. Well, the wedding day came, and they were married. And after they were married, all the company sat down to the dinner. When they began to eat the meat, that was so tasteless they couldn't eat it. But Cap o' Rushes' father, he tried first one dish, and then another, and then he burst out crying. "What is the matter?" said the master's son to him. "Oh," says he, "I had a daughter, and I asked her how much she loved me, and she said, as much as fresh meat loves salt. And I turned her from my door, for I thought she didn't love me. And now I see she loved me best of all, and she may be dead for aught I know." "No, father, here she is," says Cap o' Rushes, as she goes up to him and puts her arms round him. And so they were happy ever after. End of chapter 11. Cap o' Rushes.
Chapter 12. Teeny Tiny. Once upon a time, there was a teeny tiny woman lived in a teeny tiny house in a teeny tiny village. Now one day, this teeny tiny woman put on her teeny tiny bonnet and went out of her teeny tiny house to take a teeny tiny walk. And when this teeny tiny woman had gone a teeny tiny way, she came to a teeny tiny gate. So the teeny tiny woman opened the teeny tiny gate and went into a teeny tiny churchyard. And when this teeny tiny woman had got into the teeny tiny churchyard, she saw a teeny tiny bone on a teeny tiny grave. And the teeny tiny woman said to her teeny tiny self, This teeny tiny bone will make me some teeny tiny soup for my teeny tiny supper." So the teeny tiny woman put the teeny tiny bone into her teeny tiny pocket and went home to her teeny tiny house. Now when the teeny tiny woman got home to her teeny tiny house, she was a teeny tiny bit tired. So she went up her teeny tiny stairs to her teeny tiny bed and put the teeny tiny bone into a teeny tiny cupboard. And when this teeny tiny woman had been to sleep a teeny tiny time, she was awakened by a teeny tiny voice from the teeny tiny cupboard which said, "Give me my bone." And this teeny tiny woman was a teeny tiny frightened, so she hid her teeny tiny head under the teeny tiny clothes and went to sleep again. And when she had been to sleep again a teeny tiny time, the teeny tiny voice again cried out from the teeny tiny cupboard a teeny tiny louder, "Give me my bone." This made the teeny tiny woman a teeny tiny more frightened, so she hid her teeny tiny head a teeny tiny further under the teeny tiny clothes. And when the teeny tiny woman had been to sleep again a teeny tiny time, the teeny tiny voice from the teeny tiny cupboard said again a teeny tiny louder, "Give me my bone." And this teeny tiny woman was a teeny tiny bit more frightened, but she put her teeny tiny head out of the teeny tiny clothes and said in her loudest teeny tiny voice, "Take it." End of chapter 12. Teeny Tiny. Chapter 13. Jack and the Beanstalk. There was once upon a time a poor widow who had an only son named Jack and a cow named Milky White. And all they had to live on was the milk the cow gave every morning, which they carried to the market and sold. But one morning Milky White gave no milk, and they didn't know what to do. "What shall we do? What shall we do?" said the widow, wringing her hands. "Cheer up, mother. I'll go and get work somewhere," said Jack. "We've tried that before and nobody would take you," said his mother. "We must sell Milky White, and with the money do something, start shop or something." "All right, mother," says Jack. "It's market day today, and I'll soon sell Milky White, and then we'll see what we can do." So he took the cow's halter in his hand, and off he starts. He hadn't gone far when he met a funny-looking old man who said to him, "Good morning, Jack." "Good morning to you," said Jack, and wondered how he knew his name. "Well, Jack, and where are you off to?" said the man. "I'm going to market to sell our cow here." "Oh, you look the proper sort of chap to sell cows," said the man. "I wonder if you know how many beans make 5. "2 in each hand and 1 in your mouth," says Jack, as sharp as a needle. "Right you are," said the man. "And here they are, the very beans themselves," he went on, pulling out of his pocket a number of strange-looking beans. "As you are so sharp," says he, "I don't mind doing a swap with you, your cow, for these beans." "Walker," says Jack, "wouldn't you like it?" "Ah, you don't know what these beans are," said the man. "If you plant them overnight, by morning they grow right up to the sky." "Really?" says Jack. "You don't say so." "Yes, that is so, and if it doesn't turn out to be true, you can have your cow back." "Right," says Jack, and hands him over Milky White's halter and pockets the beans. Back goes Jack home, and as he hadn't gone very far, it wasn't dusk by the time he got to his door. "What, back, Jack?" said his mother. "I see you haven't got Milky White, so you've sold her. How much did you get for her?" "You'll never guess, mother," says Jack. "No, you don't say so. Good boy. 5 pounds? 10? 15? No, it can't be 20. I told you couldn't guess. What do you say to these beans? They're magical. Plant them overnight and—" "What?" says Jack's mother. "Have you been such a fool, such a dolt, such an idiot, as to give away my Milky White, the best milker in the parish, and prime beef to boot, for a set of paltry beans. Take that, take that, take that, and as for your precious beans, here they go out of the window. And now off with you to bed. Not a sup shall you drink, and not a bit shall you swallow this very night." So Jack went upstairs to his little room in the attic, and sad and sorry he was, to be sure, as much for his mother's sake as for the loss of his supper. At last he dropped off to sleep. When he woke up, the room looked so funny. The sun was shining into part of it, and yet all the rest was quite dark and shady. So Jack jumped up and dressed himself and went to the window. And what do you think he saw? Why, the beans his mother had thrown out of the window into the garden had sprung up into a big beanstalk, which went up and up and up till it reached the sky. So the man spoke truth after all. The beanstalk grew up quite close past Jack's window, so all he had to do was to open it and give a jump onto the beanstalk, which was made like a big plaited ladder. So Jack climbed and he 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 climbed, till at last he reached the sky. And when he got there, he found a long, broad road going as straight as a dart. So he walked along and he walked along and he walked along till he came to a great big tall house, and on the doorstep there was a great big tall woman. "Good morning, Mum," says Jack, quite polite-like. "Should you be so kind as to give me some breakfast?" For he hadn't had anything to eat, you know, the night before, and was as hungry as a hunter. "It's breakfast you want, is it?" says the great big tall woman. "It's breakfast you'll be if you don't move off from here. My man is an ogre, and there's nothing he likes better than boys broiled on toast. You'd better be moving on, or he'll soon be coming." "Oh, please, Mum, do give me something to eat, Mum. I've had nothing to eat since yesterday morning, really and truly, Mum," says Jack. "I may as well be broiled as die of hunger." Well, the ogre's wife wasn't such a bad sort after all, so she took Jack into the kitchen and gave him a junk of bread and cheese and a jug of milk. But Jack hadn't half finished these when, thump, 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 the whole house began to tremble with the noise of someone coming. "Goodness gracious me, it's my old man," said the ogre's wife. "What on earth shall I do? Here, come quick and jump in here." And she bundled Jack into the oven just as the ogre came in. He was a big one, to be sure. At his belt he had 3 calves strung up by the heels, and he unhooked them and threw them down on the table and said, "Here, wife, broil me a couple of these for breakfast." "Ah, what's this I smell? Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll have his bones to grind my bread." "Nonsense, dear," said his wife, "you're dreaming. Or perhaps you smell the scraps of that little boy you liked so much for yesterday's dinner. Here, go you and have a wash and tidy up, and by the time you come back your breakfast will be ready for you." So the ogre went off, and Jack was just going to jump out of the oven and run off when the woman told him not. "Wait till he's asleep," says she. "He always has a snooze after breakfast." Well, the ogre had his breakfast, and after that he goes to a big chest and takes out of it a couple of bags of gold, and sits down counting them, till at last his head began to nod, and he began to snore till the whole house shook again. Then Jack crept out on tiptoe from his oven, and as he was passing the ogre, he took one of the bags of gold under his arm, and off he pelters till he came to the beanstalk. And then he threw down the bag of gold, which of course fell into his mother's garden, and then he climbed down and climbed down, till at last he got home and told his mother and showed her the gold and said, "Well, mother, wasn't I right about the beans? They are really magical, you see." So they lived on the bag of gold for some time, but at last they came to the end of that, so Jack made up his mind to try his luck once more up at the top of the beanstalk. So one fine morning he got up early and got onto the beanstalk, and he climbed and he climbed and he climbed, and he climbed, and he climbed, and he climbed, till at last he had got on the road again, and came to the great big tall house he had been to before. There, sure enough, was the great big tall woman a-standing on the doorstep. "Good morning, Mum," says Jack, as bold as brass. "Could you be so good as to give me something to eat?" "Go away, my boy," said the big tall woman, "or else my man will eat you up for breakfast. But aren't you the youngster who came here once before? Do you know, that very day my man missed one of his bags of gold?" "That's strange, Mum," says Jack. "I dare say I could tell you something about that, but I'm so hungry I can't speak till I've had something to eat." Well, the big tall woman was that curious that she took him in and gave him something to eat. But he had scarcely began munching it as slowly as he could when, thump, 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 they heard the giant's footstep, and his wife hid Jack away in the oven. All happened as it did before. In came the ogre as he did before, said, "Fee, fi, fo, fum," and had his breakfast of 3 broiled oxen. Then he said, "Wife, bring me the hen that lays the golden eggs." So she brought it, and the ogre said, "Lay," and it laid an egg all of gold. And then the ogre began to nod his head, and to snore till the house shook. Then Jack crept out of the oven on tiptoe, and caught hold of the golden hen, and was off before you could say Jack Robinson. But this time the hen gave a cackle which woke the ogre, and just as Jack got out of the house he heard him calling, "Wife, wife, what have you done with my golden hen?" And the wife said, "Why, my dear?" But that was all Jack heard, for he rushed off to the beanstalk, and climbed down like a house on fire. And when he got home he showed his mother the wonderful hen, and said, "Lay," to it. And it laid a golden egg every time he said lay. Well, Jack was not content, and it wasn't very long before he determined to have another try at his luck up there at the top of the beanstalk. So one fine morning he got up early, and went on to the beanstalk. And he climbed, and he climbed, and he climbed, and he climbed, till he got to the top. But this time he knew better than to go straight to the ogre's house. And when he got near it, he waited behind a bush, till he saw the ogre's wife come out with a pail to get some water. And then he crept into the house, and got into the copper. He hadn't been there long when he heard thump, 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 as before, and in come the ogre and his wife. "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman," cried out the ogre. "I smell him, wife, I smell him." "Do you, my dearie?" says the ogre's wife. "Then if it's that little rogue that stole your gold, and the hen that laid the golden eggs, he's sure to have got into the oven." And they both rushed to the oven, but Jack wasn't there, luckily. And the ogre's wife said, "There you are again with your fee, fi, fo, fum. Why, of course it's the laddie you caught last night that I've broiled for your breakfast. How forgetful I am, and how careless you are not to tell the difference between a live un and a dead un." So the ogre sat down to the breakfast and ate it. But every now and then he would mutter, "Well, I could have sworn," and he'd get up and search the larder and the cupboards and everything, only luckily he didn't think of the copper. After breakfast was over, the ogre called out, "Wife, wife, bring me my golden harp." So she brought it and put it on the table before him. Then he said, "Sing!" And the golden harp sang most beautifully, and it went on singing till the ogre fell asleep, and commenced to snore like thunder. Then Jack lifted up the copper lid very quietly, and got down like a mouse, and crept on hands and knees, till he got to the table, when he got up, and caught hold of the golden harp, and dashed with it towards the door. But the harp called out quite loud, "Master, master!" And the ogre woke up just in time to see Jack running off with his harp. Jack ran as fast as he could, and the ogre came rushing after, and would soon have caught him, only Jack had a start, and dodged him a bit, and knew where he was going. When he got to the beanstalk,
The ogre was not more than 20 yards away when suddenly he saw Jack disappear like. And when he got up to the end of the road, he saw Jack underneath climbing down for dear life. Well, the ogre didn't like trusting himself to such a ladder, and he stood and waited, so Jack got another start. But just then the hart cried out, "Master, master!" and the ogre swung himself down onto the beanstalk, which shook with his weight. Down climbs Jack, and after him climbed the ogre. By this time, Jack had climbed down and climbed down and climbed down till he was very nearly home. So he called out, "Mother, mother, bring me an axe, bring me an axe!" And his mother came rushing out with the axe in her hand. But when she came to the beanstalk, she stood stock still with fright, for there she saw the ogre just coming down below the clouds. But Jack jumped down and got hold of the axe and gave a chop at the beanstalk, which cut it half in two. The ogre felt the beanstalk shake and quiver, so he stopped to see what was the matter. Then Jack gave another chop with the axe, and the beanstalk was cut in two and began to topple over. Then the ogre fell down and broke his crown, and the beanstalk came toppling after. Then Jack showed his mother his golden harp, and what with showing that and selling the golden eggs, Jack and his mother became very rich, and he married a great princess, and they lived happy ever after. End of chapter 13. Jack and the Beanstalk.
Chapter 14. The Story of the Three Little Pigs. Once upon a time when pigs spoke rhyme, and monkeys chewed tobacco, and hens took snuff to make them tough, and ducks went quack, quack, quacko. There was an old sow with 3 little pigs, and as she had not enough to keep them, she sent them out to seek their fortune. The first that went off met a man with a bundle of straw and said to him, "Please, man, give me that straw to build me a house." Which the man did, and the little pig built a house with it. Presently came along a wolf and knocked at the door and said, little pig, let me come in." To which the pig answered, "No, no, by the hair of my chinny chin chin." The wolf then answered to that, "Then I'll huff and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in." So he huffed, and he puffed, and he blew his house in, and ate up the little pig. The second little pig met a man with a bundle of furs, and said, "Please, man, give me that furs to build a house." Which the man did, and the pig built his house. Then along came the wolf and said, little pig, let me come in." "No, no, by the hair of my chinny chin chin." "Then I'll puff and I'll huff, and I'll blow your house in." So he huffed and he puffed, and he puffed and he huffed, and at last he blew the house down, and he ate up the little pig. The third little pig met a man with a load of bricks, and said, "Please, man, give me those bricks to build a house with." So the man gave him the bricks, and he built his house with them. So the wolf came, as he did to the other little pigs, and said, little pig, let me come in." "No, no, by the hair of my chinny chin chin." "Then I'll huff and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in." Well, he huffed, and he puffed, and he huffed, and he puffed, and he puffed, and he huffed, but he could not get the house down. When he found that he could not, with all his huffing and puffing, blow the house down, he said, "Little pig, I know where there is a nice field of turnips." "Where?" said the little pig. "Oh, in Mr. Smith's home field, and if you will be ready tomorrow morning, I will call for you, and we will go together and get some for dinner." "Very well," said the little pig. "I will be ready. What time do you mean to go?" "Oh, at 6 o'clock." Well, the little pig got up at 5, and got the turnips before the wolf came, which he did about 6, and he said, "Little pig, are you ready?" The little pig said, "Ready! I have been and come back again, and got a nice potful for dinner." The wolf felt very angry at this, but thought that he would be up to the little pig somehow or other, so he said, "Little pig, I know where there is a nice apple tree." "Where?" said the pig. "Down at Merry Garden," replied the wolf, "and if you will not deceive me, I will come for you at 5 o'clock tomorrow and get some apples." Well, the little pig bustled up the next morning at 4 o'clock and went off for the apples, and to get back before the wolf came. But he had further to go and had to climb the tree, so that just as he was coming down from it, he saw the wolf coming, which, as you may suppose, frightened him very much. When the wolf came up, he said, "Little pig, what? Are you here before me? Are they nice apples?" "Yes, very," said the little pig. "I will throw you down one." And he threw it so far that, while the wolf was gone to pick it up, the little pig jumped down and ran home. The next day the wolf came again and said to the little pig, "Little pig, there is a fair at Shanklin this afternoon. Will you go?" "Oh, yes," said the pig, "I will go. What time shall you be ready?" "At 3," said the wolf. So the little pig went off before the time as usual, and got to the fair and bought a butter churn, which he was going home with when he saw the wolf coming. Then he could not tell what to do, so he got into the churn to hide, and by so doing turned it round, and it rolled down the hill with the pig in it, which frightened the wolf so much that he ran home without going to the fair. He went to the little pig's house and told him how frightened he had been by a great round thing which came down the hill past him. Then the little pig said, "Ha! I frightened you then. I had been to the fair and bought a butter churn, and when I saw you I got into it and rolled down the hill." Then the wolf was very angry indeed, and declared he would eat up the little pig, and that he would get down the chimney after him. When the little pig saw what he was about, he hung on the pot full of water and made up a blazing fire, and, just as the wolf was coming down, took off the cover, and in fell the wolf. So the little pig put on the cover again in an instant, boiled him up, and ate him for supper, and lived happy ever afterwards. End of chapter 14. The story of the 3 little pigs.